Hey, what's going on, guys? It is WillHellmm here, and today I'm starting a new kind of limited series. I'm doing a City Skylines redevelopment project of the town of Cairo, Illinois. Yes. I've never done anything like that's supposed to be based off of a real place as closely as this is. I want to kind of take the groundwork of the foundation of the city because they've got the roads. I want to get all the roads and stuff built perfectly because the city has a bunch of infrastructure that's perfectly built because it had a maximum population of 15,000 people back in 1920. But nowadays, it's got like 2,800 people. So it's way overbuilt for the population. There's a ton of just abandoned lots, a lot of blight in the neighborhoods there. It's really fallen on some hard times ever since its kind of glory days. And the whole concept for this project is that I'm going to go through, kind of adhere as close to the real thing as possible. Obviously it's not going to be perfect. I'm just eyeballing this and using Google Earth to kind of, make sure it's lined up as closely as I can and kind of figure out based on the topography, like where the roads go. But once again, I'm trying to get this like pretty close to being, fairly realistic. Because the goal of this is to have something that kind of looks real. Because I'm in urban planning, and what I want to do with it is actually go through these kind of like small towns and cities, like especially like in the Rust Belt, that have fallen on some harder times ever since their heydays of when they were their glory days of when they actually had industry and people living there, because nowadays they just don't really have much going on there anymore, and it's kind of sad. And since I'm in urban planning, my whole goal is to just do basically what I'm doing in this series. Go to like small towns that have fallen on some harder times and try and fix them back up. Try and make them not as sad. I mean, they've got history, they've got like a bunch of pre-existing infrastructure, like I've said. They've got the train lines, they've got like the port access. In fact, they're actually building a new port there for like $40 million or something. Like, it just goes to show how like my like rationale of thinking of how to go about fixing these towns is actually based on some reality. I figured that if you're going to help these places, you gotta be able to make sure that people come there. You gotta have different ways that people can just stop there, and you gotta have the town kind of feel connected. So the first thing that I ended up doing, besides actually building out the roads, or at least the main like connection roads, I first wanted to start with the train station, because I figured, well, trains are pretty important. I mean, they can carry everything, and they've got a shit ton of train tracks in Cairo, but they don't have a train station anymore. Why? Well, that's because they just were too small. Amtrak decided to go somewhere else instead of Cairo for the stops, so they just were now just a drive-by. No one ever had to come by there, and it just really hurt the town, even more than everything else did. Just once you take a town's transportation out, like connection to the outside world, it's sentencing that town to death, because now those towns, even though they didn't have companies anymore before, which sucks obviously, they still had the potential to, rebound. But once the transportation gets taken out, and because there wasn't enough love in the city, it was just kind of left to kind of rot. But as we've been seeing across the country, there's been a larger effort to go back to these areas and try to revitalize them. The biggest example of like urban revitalization is probably, I'm just gonna say Michigan as a whole, because they've got that Pure Michigan ad campaign running, which is incredibly helpful for them. And part of the like rationale behind it is that if you're going to spend all this money to improve these cities and kind of get them back on the map, what you're gonna have to do also is you're going to have to get people to come to the city to either live there or just to visit. Now, I really have kind of thought about this because you can, do as much as you can to fix the city, pour in as much money as possible, completely revamp it. But if you don't have a good way to let people know that this city is no longer as shitty as it was before and how it's improved, people just will not be able to come, and the city just will not have been revived at all. So a big part of that is kind of, campaigning with advertisements. Now, I've looked to Michigan, once again, as a good example of this. Detroit is obviously the biggest example of revitalization in Michigan, but at the same time, they are kind of working on Michigan as a whole, not just Detroit. And that's kind of prevalent in their Pure Michigan ads. They've got some that are more focused on Detroit itself. They've got ads that are more focused on like Mackinac Island. They've got some that are even about like the Traverse Bay and Torch Lake area where my grandparents live. Like, it's just kind of nice to see that always. Anyways, the reason why I brought up the Pure Michigan ads to begin with was because it's the ad campaign. They were pretty smart with trying to change their image. Detroit had a really bad reputation for just being overall a pretty dangerous area. Not the safest, and also just after falling on those difficult times, not the nicest anymore. It was once like a pretty nice city. But unfortunately, due to all the troubles that it faced, whether that be the racial tensions and the race wars or what else was there? Just suburbanization, the decline of the auto industry. There were a lot of different factors that led to the downfall of Detroit, which is why the ad campaign is so important, or at least why I believe it is so important. So if this were to be done in real life, we would also kind of need a ad campaign of some sort to get some people to come down, see the new Cairo. It's different, it's better. It's not as bad as it once was. We promise everyone. We gotta tell everybody, hey, come over here. Because now that we've got the transportation with the train hooked up, as you can now see, people can get there much easier now. It's now not so unplausible. It's actually now a connected place. People aren't gonna move somewhere if it's in the middle of nowhere. Although if it's a new up-and-coming town that's connected to all these different forms of transportation, including river transportation, which I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool. So I think it could be a cool draw, It would get more people to come down there. You just need to start with baby steps and get more, or convince everybody to see the new places. Come check it out for themselves. Also, something that's kind of important, or at least I believe is pretty important, is that you want the train station to feel connected. When you get off of the train, you want to be in the city. You don't want to have to get on another bus, go another 30 minutes to get to the city. You want to be able to be there. So if you're going to do it in a location that's a little bit further away, now I realize that this is a little bit further from the traditional downtown area of Cairo, but at the same time it is where the, still existing train tracks are. They go there and it will take you across the river so you can get to Kentucky as well. It's the best location I could find, and also due to the fact that it's a little bit removed, there's nothing in that location, so there's a bunch of open land to start building. You've got like the abandoned train tracks, which I converted into a path, which you will actually see a lot of places in the real world do. Like, I remember when we were driving up to the UP in Wisconsin, we had to go all the way up there, and on the way, there were these old train tracks I noticed, but they weren't train tracks anymore. It was a bike path that stretched all the way up to the top of the UP. It was pretty cool, and once I saw that, it got me thinking about how I could incorporate that. And at the same time, it also got me to think about, well, what happened to the trains? Why aren't they going there anymore? I mean, you look at Europe, and they're completely connected by trains. You can take a train to any country there, and every city's got like a huge terminal. Everything, you can just get there by train. It's so convenient. In the US, you know, we had a ton of trains, and we still do have a shit ton of train tracks everywhere. But a lot of these train tracks are abandoned. They're just been left and forgotten. And that made me wonder, well, what's going on? What's with that? All these towns that were once on the railroads are no longer have a train station there. They're just being passed over. What happened to it? And so on that journey, I kind of stumbled across this whole idea, and that's kind of what I'm doing. Going through this town, which no longer has a rail station, no longer has any like ferry traffic, no longer has any like steamboat industry, and I want to add a bunch of different transportation to that area while also building out the surrounding area. Right now I'm focusing on just an area that was completely empty. Most of those roads didn't even exist. I just took what the train tracks were around and then built a whole little neighborhood inside there by the train. Because I figure if you're going to a city, you kind of want to be near everything when you get off the train. Or at least you want to have a decent area. Plus you want to have, you want that train station to have a customer base. Because trains are privately owned and operated. You've got the Metro, which, and Amtrak, which actually operates the one that used to go through Cairo. But they no longer did because it was unprofitable. Which, you know, that's fair, and that totally makes sense. If it's not profitable, why would you keep going there? So the solution is, you gotta make it profitable. You wanna make sure that that train station has a user base. So I decide, okay, if we're going to rebuild Cairo, I think we should do it a little bit further away from the traditional downtown, because that area's kind of fallen on harder times. There are a bunch of protected zones over there as well, so we can't do the larger scale projects. So if we want to bring a train station down there, we would have to use the old industrial tracks, which is fine, you know, but at the same time it doesn't link up properly, and we would have to change or bring back even more train tracks, and we don't need to do that. If we build in this area, we get to expand, grow rapidly, and build a whole new zone. We can get a bunch of commercial, some like office jobs as well, possibly, because there's a train there now. And since it's so close to the train, those people aren't disconnected from the outside world. And as we grow, that area will kind of become the new hub, while also the historic center we will also try and build up. But first, you kind of want to get that first push, because you got to have people who are willing to use the train. Because if people aren't using the train regularly, the train or the company operating those train stations are going to leave. Which, you know, makes sense. But then part of me always wonders, like, this is like really important for like the vitals of a city. Like, if we're going to make a serious effort to revitalize anywhere, I think we would really need to definitely figure out a deal with these companies, at least so then they don't feel scared to take this risky opportunity on. Like, they have a little bit of a safety net, but also just so then they don't leave. We can't have them just back out, because if we're working long term here, we need them the whole way. As you can also tell, I have actually messed around with trams in this portion of the city. Since this area is a bit further away from the traditional town center, or what was traditionally known as like downtown Cairo, I decided to mess with trams. I haven't really done much with trams, but on my with my recent Google Earth exploits, I've noticed that a lot of cities have trams now, or at least in the US, which is interesting. I never knew how many cities in the US has trams. I knew that, San Francisco had their trams. That was really it. Growing up in Chicago, we had the subway, or like very small subway, really just the L. The L mainly is what got people around in Chicago, and that's what I knew growing up. And I never really thought of, trams as an option too much until I was really on Google Earth. Looking at all these cities that have been trying to make a push towards revitalization, like I saw Detroit, they've got a tram line going now, which connects their downtown center with some further out areas and also their new sports area. And I thought, okay, trams actually make sense. Like, you can't have trains going through a city that often because it's kind of disruptful. You can't really build a big old railroad like through a bunch of homes. But what you can do is build a tram track, on a street. It doesn't matter if you put it on a street. It works perfectly fine, and it's a good mode of transportation. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna use a tram to kind of link up the city to the new train station area. And I'm really thinking that that's a good idea. And it does look pretty nice. I think that, having a way to get to the train station, which is also public transport, and to the rest of the city, is very important. I realized that you can't just have the train tracks going through like Chicago does. I think that was like a mentality that always caught me kind of locked in on like trains as a mode of transportation for inner city travel, or like inside the city. But no, they're just more for outside. You can have like a station that services to get to, from Cairo to Chicago, or Cairo to New Orleans, and that will work. You don't need one to get to different parts of the city. You can have other modes of transportation for that. And I think having different transportation and just having a integrated downtown area with shops and then density for people that are right next to all the public transit options, it just makes it look very like plausible that like if this was built like suddenly there, I could see people moving in. Like, it would definitely help the city out a lot. Anyways, that's going to be it for this episode. I'm going to kind of continue with the harbor and more in the next coming episodes. Stay tuned and subscribe. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.